Good morning, viewers. Welcome to today's edition of Focus on Parliament. My name is Agather, Atuhaire, your host. And today we thought we should talk more about Parliament and the context within which the Parliament of Uganda works. We have had many lamentations about Parliament, about how it's not playing its role, and about its independence or lack of it, and how it has become either a puppet or rubber stamps the wishes and wills of the executive or President Museveni in this case. And we seek to understand the origin of this and the exact role of Parliament, also if it is actually failing or performing in this role. What has changed? What have been the previous parliaments like? The independence of Parliament, is it any different from the previous parliaments? If so, how can it be regained? And to discuss with me that is a senior citizen who has been a member of the Constituent Assembly, a member of the 6th Parliament, and also an MP in the 7th Parliament as well, representing Ruhama in Ntungamo. He's also the first ever IGG of this country, and yes, currently he tells me he is a farmer. And that is Honourable Augustine Ruzindana. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yes, please. I think before we start, maybe greet the viewers and.
Yes, good morning, viewers and listeners. I am glad to be on this show.
We are also glad to have you.
I have been to the TVs where I think this is an online one or something.
Yes, it is.
I haven't been to these
an online TV.
Ones. No, I see how it works out.
Yes, yes, you're welcome to the show.
Okay.
So I want us to get right into this discussion. Would like to get perspective on how some of the things that happen and we complain about them or we are not satisfied with how they work. The Constitution in Article 79 gives the Parliament so many powers and roles, which include making laws and passing the budget, representation and stuff like that. What do you think, and at what extent does Parliament in Uganda play that role?
Well, that's quite difficult to talk about because Parliament is not quite well understood. And it's not only Parliament, it is governance generally. You find in the country there is a lot of mix-up about what Parliament should do, about what members of Parliament should do, and so on. Now, in the Constituent Assembly, you will notice that Parliament comes before the executive in the sequence of chapters. And that was intentional. It was intentional in the sense that Parliament, being part of government, being one arm of government, but being the representative of the people, it was deemed to be the more important arm of government with regard to the people than the other arms. And so in the sequencing, it was put before the executive and the judiciary. And some of the provisions in the Constitution have been misunderstood. For example, the power of Parliament to decide on its own remuneration was supposed to be a factor in the independence of Parliament from the executive. Because if it was deemed that if the executive decides on the remuneration of Parliament, then they can hold them, they would be the more, and there is a similar provision for the judiciary, where the judiciary is supposed to present its budget and the executive makes comments, not reducing, not and submits it to the parliament with the comments of the executive, and so that the parliament can take into account. But all that has not worked out as it was. It had been thought about when making the constitution. And so you hear parliament being sometimes unfairly criticized, and sometimes out of misunderstanding of what the role should be. I was listening to a senior person talking about the by-elections and the candidates, how they would be judged. And among the judgment he was talking about was the delivery of services by members of parliament. That's not their role. So besides the usual role of parliament, of legislation, of representation, of oversight, the oversight role is the one which can be used to fight the corruption. In a setting like Uganda and other developing countries, there is also the role of conflict resolution. That is not usually amplified. And it is in the procedure and powers of parliament to receive petitions. Parliament can receive petitions from the public. Members of parliament can amplify problems within their areas, and that is a form of conflict resolution. So there are things, of course, you've seen the strikes and threats of strikes and so on. Parliament, in its role as a conflict resolution role, it can actually intervene positively in certain areas. You've seen the amplification. See, the executive has a lot of powers and roles and so on, but the executive has got both soft power and hard power. Soft power is like where you have the funds for youth, for women, for various purposes and so on, and the delivery of services which are budgeted for. But there is also hard power. Hard power is the use of the security agencies. And you've seen in the recent past, the use of hard power has increased. And Parliament can intervene in this and say, look, why is this happening? Why is the police behaving in this way? Why is the army behaving in that? That's so that there is no building up of resentment within society because of the acts of certain arms of government. That's conflict resolution. And in a setting like ours, it is a very important role. Then the context in which we are working, for example, as a country, is that you can see the emphasis of the national project, of the building of a country. There is a lot more now about, for example, with regard to government survival in power, and with regard to the opposition groups, how they can attain power. Yes. And the activities are about that. And then how to share. And in the process, for example, the leadership in the country has lost the main element of leadership, and that is acting in the public interest. That one has been lost. The leadership, whether in government, whether outside the government, has become more transactional leadership than leaders who want to articulate the interests of whoever they are representing. And in the process, in the loss of the vision of the building of nation building, then you have a process which has been gradual, but which is accelerating, of people reverting to their ethnic enclaves. And their ethnic enclaves, reverting to the ethnic enclaves, basically to be able to bargain for opportunities at the national level. And that is happening a great deal at religious level, at the ethnic level. You see it, people saying youth, you see it, and so on. And it's quite a big problem. And that's the context. The context of the loss of the nation building project. That one, you see it, you see, and then the loss of the quality of leadership being reduced to transactional leadership. And so you will find that over time, as the budget has been getting bigger, delivery of services is deteriorating rather than getting better. And yet the budgets are getting bigger, local government budgets, central government budgets, departmental budgets, project budgets, and so on. They get bigger. So why does delivery of services not improve? And these are questions where Parliament comes in.
Yeah.
Because as individuals, as groups of individuals, it's not possible to raise them, and it's Parliament that can actually carry out this role. And so sometimes people are angry with the Parliament without actually knowing why they are angry.
Yes.
Because they think there is a role they are not playing, but they are not clear about that role.
So the person who talked about service delivery in this by-election was not wrong after all, because you're saying
service delivery not by individual MPs.
By a collective.
No, service delivery with regard to the arms of government is by the executive.
I know.
At the central
Yeah.
and at the local government level. And I've said budgets are bigger. Every time they are bigger. But the service delivery does not trickle down to the beneficiaries as it should. So
please help us clarify what the role of Parliament then is.
The role of Parliament, among its roles, is oversight.
Which would improve service delivery.
Oversight, the budget, the Parliament passes budgets for delivery of services. And the principle, the basic principle behind public funds is that public funds must be used for a public purpose. And that's what Parliament should be looking for. We voted this for this public purpose. What has happened? Yeah. And that's a big role that Parliament can undertake. And then and what I'm saying applies even to the other elected structures like district councils and so on, because the district council has a reduced role of Parliament, except that at the district council, legally and constitutionally, we don't have the proper mechanism. At the parliamentary level, Public Accounts Committee is a committee of Parliament. At the district level, Public Accounts Committee is not a committee of council. Actually, it has nobody to report to. It has got that particular problem. But that is the context. Okay. So when we are looking at Parliament, we often quarrel with the institution and the members, quite often from an uninformed uninformed,
Yeah.
yes, an informed position. And so you will find the people going into details. What does a member of parliament earn? What does which car does a member of parliament drive? Yes, but has anybody ever proposed which car a member of parliament should drive? Is it a pickup? The NRC had pickups bought by government.
Yeah.
After that, we who came in later, we bought our own cars. We didn't get free cars. We got what the government did was to guarantee loans to us at 12%, and we never got free cars. And then later things did change and so on. But those are details.
Yes.
Those are details. The principle is the role of parliament, is the role of elected institutions at the district level, at the city level, like KCC, and so on.
Okay, so on the role of conflict resolution and the use of hard power by the executive, we have seen Parliament has not played that role very much.
It actually has. I have seen commanders of the police, of the army, being summoned to various committees and so on. Now, the issue is the implementation of whatever they find. If they issue reports, and I suspect they do issue reports, but the issue is what happens. And when to the public, institutions look incapacitated, then there is a distrust of institutions. And when you look I am a member of the public now, if you look at the feeling of members of the public, there isn't much trust in institutions of government and organs like parliament, like the executive and so on. That's why you find people rushing, looking for the president for a matter that could have been handled at some level. Yes. People looking for the highest person they can get and so on, because there is no confidence in these institutions. And that's quite a serious problem.
Okay, so on implementation, because we have talked about it on this show so many times, how government recommendations, resolutions are ignored and not implemented. How do we apportion blame on that? Because that's what, at the end of the day, members of the public blame on Parliament, because they didn't see the results.
Yes, that is...
What can be done?
No, see, there is... I don't know how we apportion blame. Even the educated members of society, actually their understanding of governance is not high. They really don't care now. You find probably the more educated people don't even vote, unless they have a friend who is standing or something like that. But that's why you'll find, for example, in Kampala, consistently, the higher members of society never turn up to vote. No, they don't. And you will find the mayors of Kampala win with about 250,000, 300,000, when the voting population is over 1 million. The total of votes cast never go to 40% to 50%. And so on. And countrywide, that is happening now. The turn-up, there are by-elections coming. You find out the turn-up. It won't be 40%. Yeah. It will be very low. Now, people, when you disenfranchise yourself, you actually deny yourself the right to ask questions. Because if you didn't participate in elections, what right do you have to ask questions about performance by the elected people, by government and so on, when you are not bothered about who is there and what they promise, and you don't know what they promised, you don't know what they did. And this is...
But also, what is responsible for that? Do you blame it on the people that are not voting, or the lack of faith that you were talking about in institutions, or maybe in the process as well?
Yes, but those who don't vote, the highest percentage is more of the informed people. So if the informed people are actually not bothered about how the country is managed, then they are partly to blame. You do not, you will find the people talking about the size of parliament, that it is too big. But when was it a public issue? Because parliament has been expanded over time, and people don't discuss the expansion. Why? And then they come and complain, numbers are too big. Yes, but when the numbers were being increased, what did you say? Now you exclude because the concern of the more informed people about governance of the country is minimal.
Mm.
They are concerned about we have a very highly consumptive society. You people are concerned about enjoyment. you are enjoying society. But if you are not a productive society, what will you enjoy? The savings rate of this country is very low compared to the savings rate of India, of China, of Korea, of Singapore, and so on. Here we consume.
Yeah.
And you just, well, this is a weekend, you will be attending weddings and graduations and LDCs graduating soon, I think. You will see what happened. And in all those, because enjoyment is showing that situations are okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you are.
Well, that is our way of consoling ourselves and
No,
finding.
it's not consoling. It is affirmation that you are happy with the situation. It is affirmation. That one I can.
Okay, so you mentioned something about the independence of parliament and how you put in place measures like remuneration of members of parliament to strengthen that independence. When you look at it now and Parliament, what do you make of it? Is that independence?
No, what that one which we provided for has been in a way adulterated. In the sense that we had thought that Parliament would be reasonable in deciding what it should be remunerated. But I remember some time back we had actually consolidated a lot of what were allowances, because NRC, the National Resistance Council, which was Parliament before us, was actually paid nothing. They were depending on allowances. So they had allowances for sitting in plenary, in committees, and car bought by government, and so on. All those we consolidated. But now, later I heard that one has been undone, and I think people are paid for sitting in plenary, and that is actually the job they are elected for. They are elected to sit in plenary, in committees, and so on. If you are paid a salary, there is no need for an allowance for that.
For doing that job,
that's what you are paid for. For commit work out of station and all those. That's where the adulteration has come in. But it can. The remedy is possible. The remedy is possible.
As far as independence is concerned, or remuneration?
No, of those details of remuneration. Because once they become remunerated in a very large, with very large amounts, then elections become an investment. And when people complain about monetization of when you see what members get paid and what people spend to get elected, it's really an investment. And then they try to recoup the investment they have made, and that's the wrong. That is the wrong element that undermines the credibility of the institution before the people. So that one needs to be corrected by the institution. As to the other things which are complained about, that they undermine the standing of Parliament during elections and so on, the monetization of elections, that is partly not the fault of candidates. It is partly the fault of the electoral system we have. The electoral system we have is individual candidates in constituencies, and those individual candidates expend money for all the requirements to be elected. Now, a lot of people spend money and don't get elected, and it is a calamity. Many people run bankrupt and so on. Now, this system is not the prevalent one in the world. In the world, the prevalent electoral system is a proportional representation system. Proportional, where the parties are the ones which stand for elections rather than individual candidates. And political parties present, they assume you have, like we have a parliament of 500 members. So each party in the election will have a list of the 500 members. And if the party gets 10% of the votes, it will get 10% of the seats.
Yes.
Now, the individual candidates do not have to expend any money. But they have no constituency. They are just on the list of the party. So what they struggle to do is to be on the list, and how high. Because if you are high up on the list, then if the party gets, let's say, 5%, you are assured. If the party, whatever the percentage the party gets. The disadvantage of that system is that parties are very strong compared to the individuals. But individuals are also strong because they can get out of a party and go and get elected. You saw in South Africa, the ANC, the youth leader, Malema, got out. The first election, he got 6% of the votes. And had more than 30 members of parliament. The last election, they got more than 11%. So the party can oppress you, but you can more easily get out. And when you get out, whatever support you get, it will take you to representative election. So that's it is the electoral system which we have that monetizes the electoral process, because the individual has got to have the money, and with regard to the high remuneration now, elections, the electoral process becomes an investment process.
So the remuneration that has become high and that Ugandans complain about is as a result of the commercialization of the process?
Yes, because people spend a lot of money in the process. So we can't. You see, now we are in the East African community. Congo has come into the system. Congo has got a proportional representation system. Burundi has a proportional representation system. Rwanda has a proportional representation system. So eventually, if we are going to have a federation would mean harmonization of the governance process, which would include the electoral system and so on. So it is high time that we actually begin getting interested
in the
proportional representation. On mainland Europe, that is the system. There is no. Now, we inherited this from the British, the Americans did, the Indians did, and when you see in America how much money they require for an individual to be elected.
So you're saying that the only way to remedy this is by going back to proportional?
It is by reviewing the electoral system. We can review the electoral system because most of Africa is using proportional representation. And it has advantages. For example, if South Africa did not use proportional representation, the whites and the Indians would disappear. But now, every party, when it puts a list, it has Europeans, it has Indians on the list. And they are not marginalized. They are in cabinet, they are in local governments and so on. Now here, the reason our parliament is extremely big is that every group wants to see itself in parliament. And so, as population is increased, even the small ethnic groups become big in number. So they want to see themselves there. Now, you can still have people reflected without our present system. For example, our present system marginalizes the youth. It requires a lot of money to be elected. The youth have no money. So they cannot participate. If you have a and women are also marginalized. That's why you have got seats, which they call affirmative action. In essence, they are not. Take a woman in Kampala who represents Kampala, who has to campaign in the whole of Kampala, and you call it affirmative action. How? When the others are campaigning in small bits, and for her she's campaigning in the whole of Kampala, or a district like Wakiso and so on. Okay, she's competing against the woman, but both women have difficulties. So we can engineer this with the change of the electoral system, and the youth would be reflected, and the women would be reflected, and all the ethnic groups would be reflected, and everyone would be reflected. That's possible. And then the expenditure of money at an individual level would be eliminated. There are other disadvantages with that system because it doesn't have constituencies at an individual level. But even constituencies at an individual level, for example, the last election gave the bulk of the constituencies to NUP in Buganda. But 40% of the people voted for NRM. So where are they? The 40%. So there are remedies. There are possible, even mixtures. There is a possibility of mixing this.
Okay, so on the size of parliament, you said we shouldn't question when the size is already large, but during the process probably of increasing it. But how do the numbers, for example, having 429 members now, how does that affect the quality of
500.
529.
Now the 500, I will not quarrel with the. There are small constituencies. They are very large. If you see, for example, Kampala. Now we are all Kampalans. Kampala should complain. Why would Kampala have only about 10, 11 members when the population is so large? And so the fact of constituencies itself is a merit, but it is also a merit that is questionable. And you can look into it. So, but there are variations of the proportional one. Germany has a mixture of both.
Proportional
and they are very and there are others. If you see the way they elect people in the Northern Ireland, and other places, when you go to the polling station, you show preferences. So because a person to be elected must get more than 50%, but there is a person who may get 30%. But he may also get more than 50% as a second preference. And that is taken into account in calculating as who is a winner and so on. And all those can actually be done.
Okay.
But the more important thing, since I have come to this forum, it was you see, the effectiveness of the state depends on the effectiveness of the institutions of the state. Now, we are talking about one institution, and that is Parliament. So, if that institution is not effective, it's not possible that the other institutions are effective. No. It's the law of averages will work out so that and that's a worry. That is a worry. The state, an effective state at our level of development is very important. It is a very, very important thing. And so the effectiveness of the institutions of state are very important. Now, the other element which is missing is the citizen, an active citizenry. You see, when we got independence, the independence was with regard to the sovereignty of the state. But the sovereignty of the people is not there. This is what the Sri Lanka people have exercised. There are two sovereignties. There is a sovereignty of the state, and there is a sovereignty of the people. And our people do not understand this concept. And so they are incapacitated. And that's why you complain about, let's say, the size of Parliament after the fact. You complain about most things after the fact. And yet, there are stages when these things are coming into place. There is a time a policy is being announced. That is a stage for discussion. There is a stage when it goes to Parliament. That is a stage for discussion. And so on. Now, all these stages pass, and there is no input. So, the element of the sovereignty of the people, there is need, and this is a role the parliamentarians can exercise, of educating about the people, becoming conscious about their role. And this role is not there. You see, how do you become yourself effective as a member of Parliament? There is nobody giving you feedback. There is nobody. How many petitions does Parliament get? Aren't there innumerable problems? Why is there no petition?
But what causes this lack of consciousness? Lack of the sovereignty?
You the educated people.
What have we done?
What you have done, you are just...
not done.
You are just about
enjoying life.
yourself. You are about just enjoying yourself.
It goes back to enjoying ourselves.
Yeah. But even in enjoyment, even if you are in a bar, surely you can discuss important matters.
In a bar?
Yeah. You don't become inebriated immediately.
But I want to disagree and think there must be a cause that makes the educated prefer more to go to a bar than to maybe participate in the politics of this country. There could be an underlying issue that the apathy of we know, even if we discussed, even if we went and voted, our vote probably doesn't count. That has been the feeling. So there has to be something in the governance, in the leadership that causes this and that can cure it. Don't you think?
Yeah, but there is a mistake that people think the leadership is only in the government. What does civil society do? Civil society, the concept of civil society comes around in the 1920s. And there is a debate, even now, not concluded, about the extent of civil society. But civil society is absent. Because, see, we have a civil society which is not member-based. Most organizations are apex organizations within civil society. And so they represent no interests. No. Those which are member-based, like the trade unions, have been co-opted into virtually part of, even the part of the debate is whether religious organizations are part of civil society. But in principle, they are. But when you look at them, they are not very different from appendages of the state. In lots of ways. In lots of ways. To the extent that also the state, ours is a secular state. But it is now virtually intertwined with religions. When you have state functions, you've got innumerable people who are coming to pray and so on. But it's not. So that consciousness which you are talking about, the main activation of consciousness is a civil society. And in our case, it is an emasculated civil society. And then
but can you blame civil society with the shrinking civic space and the closure of NGOs?
All of them do not have to be with a political agenda. No. For example, an association of engineers is part of civil society. An association of doctors is part of civil society. An association of journalists is part of civil society. But what has the Association of Engineers said on the quality of roads? You see roads after a road that has got a lifespan of 15 years, it needs patching potholes in 2 years. What is the report of the
Association of Engineers?
They don't have to be political. They don't have. You hear people complaining about fake drugs, whether of animals or human beings, and so on. So the activation, the consciousness of civil society is actually very, very important. The religious organization, they've got voluntary followers. They come in hundreds and thousands. But what is the message they hear? About miracles, about and so on. So you do have and thanking the state for the latest gift and so on. So there is a lot. Then there are the political leaders. The political leaders, if you look at them, I've told you a lot about the the preponderance of transactional leadership in the political area, and that's quite a problem, because what it means is that these are interested in cutting deals. You've seen even sale of parties. I mean, what? So it's the seller is a political leader, the buyer
is a political leader.
Is a political leader. No. It is a bit of a problem. So, what does this convey to me?
Yeah.
What it conveys to me is that I am worried. I am worried that the country has serious ingredients of instability, and there is no serious attempt to find solutions. And when you look around at institutions as to which one would hold the country together if the seeds of instability are actualized, then you get actually worried. You get worried. You see, when you saw the lines of people going to the palace in Sri Lanka, they were going in lines. They were not just rushing. No. Going in lines means they were organizers.
Yeah.
It means that they were organizers, even for the strikes and so on. They were largely peaceful. That means there were people who could hold, who could guide the population. Where do you see that here?
Okay, let's hold on to that and take a short break and return and pick up from that.
Okay.
But also, since we are talking about Parliament as one institution, what role it should play in allaying the worries you have. We'll be right back.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Welcome back from that short break. You're still on the Focus on Parliament with me, Agather, and we're still with Honourable Augustine Ruzindana, former Member of Parliament, former IGG, and talking about really the role of Parliament and how it is being executed and the entire context within which Parliament and other institutions in this country work. And before we took a break, Honourable, you were talking about your worry about the serious ingredients of instability. And the question I wanted to ask was, since Parliament is what we are focusing on here, what role can it play in allaying these fears that you and many other Ugandans have, or preventing instability in this country?
Parliament has a very, very important role. The impediment to service delivery is not necessarily a small budget. It is the leakages in the budget. And the leakages are what is popularly known as corruption.
Yeah.
And Parliament can actually go after that and make sure that the leakages are minimized. Because there are leakages at the center, and there are leakages at the local government level. And all these are within the power of Parliament to make sure that they are minimized. The power to do that, the oversight role, there are many meetings of committees and so on, but that power is not effectively undertaken. When I was in Parliament, we created an association called African Parliamentarians Network Against Corruption, APNAC. And I was founder chair, and I was chair for 10 years. And we had 20 chapters in African parliaments, including Uganda. That was mainly to sensitize members of parliament and parliaments as institutions on how to effectively carry out that role. And that role is missing. That role can be effectively undertaken, and that role is missing. In the budgeting process, the parliament can make sure that, for example, a budget is pro-poor, a budget is taking into account the interests of women, of the youth, of rural communities, and so on. And quite often, you do find that the way it comes from the executive, it virtually goes through with minor changes, and that can be done because the process of making a budget is a long one, and actually it is inclusive. It is quite inclusive, and Parliament comes in. It's not as long ago. Long ago, Parliament would wait for the budget until it is read, but now its role comes earlier, and that can improve on service delivery, because what is the concern of ordinary people? The concern of ordinary people is to get services, and the services are poorly delivered. Whether it is in health, whether it is, you go to rural areas now, the roads are worse than they used to be, and there are the tarmac ones. Those have there are many more now, but the rural roads are not, and all those are things Parliament can. There is the question of all the institutions of good governance report to Parliament. Institutions of good governance, the IGG, the Human Rights Commission, the Auditor General, and such. Those are called institutions of good governance. They report to Parliament. I am not sure about the importance attached to the reports of the Human Rights Commission, because when you get reports, then you can also talk about the deficiencies of the institution itself, and the IGG and the Auditor General. People hear about it in the Public Accounts Committee and so on. Yes. But the Public Accounts Committee is not the end. No, when the Public Accounts Committee makes a report, the closure is called the Treasury Memorandum. Yeah. The Treasury Memorandum is now the Secretary to the Treasury must get answers raised by Parliament from each of the accounting officers, and then submit them. I'm not sure.
It is never tabled.
And I'm not sure about even following that up.
Which goes back to what we are talking about, implementation.
So the question of the role of Parliament in diffusing the tension arising from poor services within the country is quite strong. It is quite strong. Now, there is of course a problem. And when I went out of Parliament, I was teaching parliaments on the continent of Africa for about 10 years. There is nowhere a person goes to school to become a member of Parliament. And that's part of the problem. So there is a need, actually, even within Parliament, to sensitize members of Parliament on their role and how to make it effective. And quite often, a member of Parliament learns, the young lady who was speaking in Parliament, I've seen on social media, this could have help. And I think what the young lady showed, she must have campaigned in her local language.
Campaigns are always in local language, aren't they?
And she was fluent. Now she comes to speak another language. I think we have got, now they are talking of Swahili. South Africa has got 11 national languages. And you can speak Zulu in Parliament. You can speak Xhosa in Parliament. Zambia has also several national languages. We can actually, you can have English as an official language, Swahili as an official language, but you can actually have several languages in a Parliament. Yeah. And then you have got people who translate for the Hansard. I saw that the young lady made a point. The school in her constituency did not have teachers. That is a very important point. But people were looking at the language. Yeah,
more than the point.
But if she expressed herself in her language, I think there would be no problem. And even our time, we didn't raise it. But it has come to my notice that really people should be free to speak in the languages they are fluent.
Okay, so let's go back to the issue of independence of Parliament that we talked about here. And you say there were so many measures to ensure it then, when the Constitution was being made. My question is, what do things that events we see, like when the army invades Parliament, or when President Museveni insists on a certain position in Parliament? We've seen it in passing laws, we've seen it in the Appointments Committee of Parliament when they are approving ministers he has appointed. What do those events, what do they say about the independence of Parliament?
See, I think it would be unfair to expect that Parliament can become independent in an isolated form. Over time, you see, what we had done in the Constitution, in the Constituent Assembly, was to allocate power and also to put constraints on the exercise of power. Now, you will find that the constraints placed on the executive have sort of evaporated, because over time, probably unintentionally, the president, everybody finds him there, and so in the executive, the president is virtually the executive.
Yeah.
And all the legislative program originates from the executive. And so, of course, there is the law also allows members to originate bills and so on, but the capacity to do that is impeded by the fact that a member must get a certificate
of financial implication.
Yes, and that is from the executive.
Yeah.
So that it is environmental. It is very difficult for an institution in that environment itself to say it's not only for that one. Let me give you some history. The NRA is the one which formed the NRM.
Yes.
So it is the core of the NRM. So when you come in law and the Constitution and say that the NRA now, UPDF, should not be part of its child. It is very difficult. So in practice, when we are doing things in our environment, there are certain things we should take into account. That Parliament is really still the NRC. For me, I was a member of Parliament during the movement system, not in the multi-party system. And it was actually more comfortable to work in that system.
Yeah.
Because the system was a lot more liberal. Now, when the multi-party...
The movement system was more liberal than the multi-party system.
Yeah, it was more liberal because the state was all included everyone. Now, the state is exclusive.
Oh, yes. And openly so. Then it was exclusive, but maybe...
So, the institutions that work in that environment have to walk in a tightrope. In a tightrope, because the multi-party system has really never taken place. It is there in law, but in practice it is not there. And so you've got to see how institutions work. For example, people are members of the opposition, but they are also in government. They are members of Parliament, they are members of KCCA, and even heading them and so on. So it brings a lot of confusion.
So, are you saying that you people...
Let me tell you, independence of the... See, even the Westminster model does not have independence. The president is part of the legislative process. He has got to assent every law. That's part of the legislation. They originate the law, and that is the same in the UK. And it is the Queen who comes and reads the legislative agenda for the year, the Queen's speech, and so on. So, when you go back to history, how did cabinet arise in England? George III was a German. He couldn't speak English, and therefore he couldn't chair cabinet. That's how a prime minister came about. The position of prime minister. Before that, the king was the legislator, the head of religion, the army commander, and so on. And these are the things we inherited. But when we inherited them, in the American form of separation of powers, the separation of powers was a concept that came about in the 17th century. And now, ours is still an evolving system. It is still an evolving system. We come about in 1986, captured power. It wasn't given. And then institutions that were there are modified to take into account the process of coming into power. And it is that process that informs the way we do things. So that's why, of course, some of us, there was the Constituent Assembly which was a national dialogue process. After some time, you need something like that. And I am, of course, convinced that as of now, we need a sort of get-together of that type, so that because there are lots of contradictions. You hear lots of ideas, some of them wild and so on. Okay. How do we sieve them and then move forward? In the draft Constitution, there was a National Council of State, borrowed from some other countries, from Ghana, from and so on, which is a sort of Senate. In Kenya, they have a Senate. It doesn't have to have improved matter, but it is an institution where things are looked at again.
After Parliament?
After the National
So
Assembly.
two-chamber
yes, it was there in the draft Constitution. It was rejected by the CA. There was a National Council of State. And it is there in Ghana. And the council,
what was the reason?
I have seen in the National Council of State in Ghana, it includes representatives of the traditional authorities, so that the Kabaka can have a representative, or if he wants once in a while, sit there. And these others are more Chabazinga and so. But other people, for example, I now wouldn't mind sitting in that type of institution, but now, because that one does not require me running around in the villages, in hills, and then dishing out money. And so on.
And actually, I wanted to ask about it, the idea of two chambers of Parliament. But for me, it wasn't for that. It was for maybe catering for the numbers. And now you're talking about sort of approving or reviewing what the National Assembly has.
When you get those ones, you have to define how they get there, how they represent those areas. In Kenya, for example, they have created counties, 47 counties, and the Senate represents those ones. They conform virtually to ethnic groups. And here, the National Council of State, which was proposed, would have included ex officio, for example.
Why was it rejected?
The people thought it was not necessary. But for example, if you have a former president just sitting in his village, and so on, so you will find in the National Council of State of Ghana, they are there. They are there. What if somebody came and proposed the motion of abolishing traditional leaders? How could traditional leaders defend themselves? Where would they? I mean, they need a forum where they can be, and that is the one.
Okay.
And so now, two, there are people who have got experience. What has happened to all these former vice chancellors? I saw one of them going to run for parliament and did miserably.
Professor Bariamure.
And so, but they have experience. They have vast experience. They have vast knowledge, and you just disappear. I mean, there are many. These bishops are retired. Some retired at 65, some at 75. They have vast experience. Where do they go? But
we are already complaining of how much we spend on one parliament.
The remuneration bit, as I have said, is something that needs review.
Yeah.
Like the remuneration of all public officers and so on. It needs review. We need a specific institution whether you call it a commission, whether you call it what, for the remuneration of public officers.
Okay, let me ask before our time runs out. There's the issue of removal of term limits, which was in the parliament you sat in, has been really most times referred to as one of the darkest times of the constitution and governance, and it was followed by the removal of age limit later. Do you think Parliament can reinstate those two safeguards?
I think Parliament can reinstate them. There are merits. There are merits for you see, a president has a lot of power. Our constitution says all executive authority is vested in the president. And he has a lot of authority and power and so on. And that's why there are limits placed on how long tenure can be held from that office. Some people have confused that with placing the same limit on members of parliament. No, members of parliament have no authority. It is the institution that has authority. A member of parliament has only persuasive authority to persuade other people to agree with him or her. So that same principle does not apply. Except, for example, where you've got affirmative seats. You can't be affirmative forever. I think that one there should be some limit. But the question of placing limits on the tenure, I think even the current holder of the office would not oppose it.
But he's the one who...
No. At the time, yes. At the time. But the situation the situation has changed. With regard to age and education, I am not convinced they have merit. No. Even in here, I wasn't convinced. But people were remembering about the lack of education of Amin. And it informed the insistence on education. But in the previous parliaments after independence, they were actually, those who didn't have the, let's say, S4, they would undergo English tests. Why do you have to have a qualification in physics? Because A-level means you may have studied physics or history or geography or whatever. So there is already a limitation on age. You see, the Constitution says a citizen has the right to be represented or to take part in the leadership of the country. So the age limit is there of 18. Now, when you put education, it's a very big impediment.
But we are already complaining that the reason we have a parliament that is not functional could be because of education.
I don't think professors who are there perform better than those who are not professors. No. Because the environment of parliament there is nobody who goes to parliament with the proper education. No. And then in fact, we had proposals when I tried to go to the East African Legislative Assembly. Part of it was I thought we should introduce. I had seen there is an institution for the SADC countries for members of parliament. It's I thought something like that, which teaches people how to become members of parliament, would be quite useful.
What would they be teaching?
You see how long I have been talking. A member of parliament becomes a member of the chartering classes. The chartering classes are teachers, lawyers, those who talk. Who talk. Now, what I did when I left Parliament, I was teaching Parliament how to, members of Parliament how to be. So when you are teaching, it is easier to tell a person that when you are a member of Parliament, you should dress well. You should appear in a certain manner. You should maintain a certain amount of cleanliness. When we were in Parliament, there is a member for whom we bought a deodorant and put it in his pigeonhole because he was walking and sweating and coming. When he did this, he was wearing kaunda. When he did this, then how to approach issues, how to do research, how to.
Can someone who did not go to school do research, for example?
No, yes. If you tell them how to do it, if you teach them how to do it, they will.
Okay.
They will, and so the quality of the members of Parliament can be improved overall. And you've seen, no matter what qualification people have, the doctors, professors, and what, they are not necessarily more effective than those who are less educated. No.
Okay, so I'll go back to reinstating term limits.
Yes.
You think it is possible?
I think it is useful. I think it is useful. You see, longevity in power has got its own problems. It has got its own problems. In certain settings, it leads to abuse of power. It leads to corruption. Even in Europe, the Chancellor Corps of Germany was a chancellor for 18 years. Now, unlike our parliaments, members of parliament in most of the world have a certain immunity. He had to resort to immunity of parliament not to be prosecuted. Because there are certain things longevity leads to that can be avoided by. Now, the 2 terms don't have to be the party. The party can be there for a long time. The Liberal Party of Japan has been in power most of the period since the Second World War. But the Japanese Prime Minister, this one who was killed the other day, was there for long, I think 6 years, the longest. So the lead at the apex is the most presidents in the US have been Republicans. So the policy for transformation, there is a need of policy consistency. And you see it in many countries, the Congress Party in India, or the Liberal Party in China. Of course, Mexico had an extreme one. The PRI was in power from 1929 to a few years back. I think we have the first president or the second. And so on. So a party being in power for a very long time may not be a calamity. But an individual, it can be.
It can be. Okay, so my last question for today is about the rumor. I don't know if it is a rumor that that Parliament should. There's an amendment that a certain group wants to put forward for Parliament to be the one to elect the president. And it has been around for a while. What do you think about that?
Where you journalists are rumormongers, I have seen it. It's not new. It has been there for quite some time. In principle, there is nothing wrong with it. It is done in many countries. But if it was to be done, I think we would have to change the electoral system. For example, the president of South Africa is elected by parliament. But South Africa has a proportional representation system. And in other words, Parliament actually represents what happened on the day of elections. Ours doesn't. Ours doesn't. That's why you find people complaining about theft and so on. In many cases, there may be no theft. But when the overall opposition gets about 40% of the votes and gets less than 20% of the seats, then there is a problem. So if you have Parliament electing when it is not actually representative, then there is a problem. But if the proposal was going concurrently with the change of electoral system, I really don't mind.
But what would it be supposed to cure, for example? What would it want to cure?
What it would want to cure, as of now, what is monetized is not just parliamentary elections or election of councillors, but the presidential one is much more monetized. You need a lot of money to stand for president. And thus, there are hardly viable competitors of an incumbent. There is no the incumbent in our setting uses the state machinery, and now anyone else coming up, even if the Electoral Commission gives them a car and a few policemen, it doesn't.
How different would it be if they are being elected by a parliament which is now dominated by the party of the incumbent?
No. In most cases, proportional representation does not give a two-thirds majority. So there would be negotiations. There would, in ANC still gets two-thirds of the seats, but in future it will probably not be able to do so. And it has happened before. Obote didn't stand for elections in 1980. No, it is by virtue of being leader of the majority party that he became president.
Yeah.
So it has been there before.
Okay.
There is no, and really, it would save people a headache. Did you see what happened to Amriat and Bobby Wine
during the previous elections?
I mean, they were. It would save us a lot of those.
Of embarrassments
but the proviso is that we would have to have a change of electoral system so that actually Parliament represents the actual votes cast. It doesn't now. No.
Okay. Okay, so maybe just one last clarification. If I still had many more questions, maybe we'll call you, invite you back to the show. But one last clarification.
You better finish.
One last clarification I wanted to ask about was the role of opposition in Parliament. I don't know if you've heard Ugandans say even the opposition, they are there to eat for themselves, to serve their interests, and they think they are not doing any differently from the NRM MPs in Parliament.
You see,
what is your view?
We inherited the British system. The opposition in England and the UK is called the loyal opposition. In other words, the opposition is not, when in the Parliament, is not expected to be on the streets and so on, because it has a forum. It has a forum. And then, when the members of the opposition go to Parliament, they are co-opted into the state because they become employees of the state and they get benefits of the state and so on. And then they share the same interests, for example, on remuneration with those, with their colleagues. And eventually, because through interaction, I suspect people in the opposition become friendly with people in government and vice versa. So the concept of a disruptive opposition is not consistent with membership in an institution of state. Once you become a member of an institution of state, you are governed by the rules, you are governed by the law relating to that particular institution, and that's it. And that's what happens. And yet, members of the public say, no, but these ones should become disruptive.
Yeah.
And how there are rules of parliament. If a member is in parliament, if the government introduces an item, the leader of the opposition will be given an opportunity to reply. And all those are there. So how does he reply in parliament and afterwards go and demonstrate on the street?
Yeah.
So that is the... So the situation as it is, there are members of the public who expect the members of parliament to take part in civic activities. And I give you an example in England recently now. I think the strike of the railways are still on. And the leader of the opposition requested members of the shadow cabinet not to be on the picket lines. Picket lines, that is demonstrating. So that is the system we are running here. And so members of the public who expect a member of parliament to have talked in parliament and then go on the streets to demonstrate, that is not what is expected. No, that is no. That's why there is the contradiction.
Yeah.
It's like you go to church, you are doing well, and you do whatever is required there, and then afterwards you go and criticize. No, how? You are a member of the church.
Okay. Since you indicated we might not get you again, we won't get the opportunity. I would like you to also talk about briefly the leadership in parliament. When you are in the 6th and 7th parliament, was there the same level of interference in choosing the leadership of parliament from the executive as there is now?
Where that's why I'm telling you that the system in which I operated was the movement system.
Yes.
Now, for us, we moved from CA to parliament with our former chair of CA, the late Wapakaburo. There was no problem of disharmony. Two, even on the other members of parliament, those who, in the movement system, it was easier to harmonize. It was easier to harmonize so that what we did within the parliament did not have the same type, or the campaigns, for example. Like the speakers were campaigning and so on. No, that did not happen. And in other parliaments, actually, it doesn't happen. The previous member, the Speaker of the House of Commons in the UK, was a member of the Labour Party, or opposition. But when a speaker becomes a speaker, you are a speaker. You are not partisan. You are not partisan for that period. And in a number of countries, the speakers actually, once they are elected, do not represent constituencies anymore. You just
leave that seat and another MP is elected.
You just remain a speaker. You can remain a member of your party. So, what the role of a speaker? The role of a speaker is an impartial role. Administers the rules of parliament, the law relating to parliament, and so on. And if you see the chaos in Sri Lanka, it is the speaker, even those who are on the street, who are appealing to. Speaker do this. So speakers must elevate themselves above certain, above certain.
But the selection process in our case negates that impartiality.
No. Usually, I can see the selection process here of campaigning. I think there should be a lot more harmonization than require. Campaigns become dirty. Now the campaigning for the leadership of the Conservative Party in England is becoming dirty. Some young lady has come up and they are digging. Who is her boyfriend? So the element of campaigns actually does introduce an element that probably bars the speakers from being elevated.
So then how should they be?
No, there are established procedures on elections of speakers. There is usually harmonization between the parties which are there, and that can still be done. It can still be done, and then over time, the previous speaker, second was a member of the NRM, but really second you would see was above
the party sentiments
and so on. Then the successor was also a part official because she was vice chair. I think once people become speakers, they should relinquish
the positions in the party.
The positions of party leadership and so on. But people who are judges have been members of parties. But you can't be a judge and also be
a member of. No, thank you very much. And unfortunately, our time is fast spent. Unless you have any parting shots that you want to.
Well, my parting shots are what I had told you earlier, that when I look at the types of things which are happening, I get worried. Because there is one thing that all of us should agree upon, and that is stability of the country. Because everybody has a stake in the stability of the country, and we should all agree to maintain stability of the country. Now, when I see what is there in the country, there are lots of ingredients that can cause instability. And when I look at the solutions, if that happens, I get more worried.
They are not there. Thank you very much, Honourable Augustine, for being with us today. And my takeaway from this is actually what you closed with, the stability of the country and how it looks, and what every one of us should look at. Every day on this show, I think we have asked ourselves the role of Parliament and the power it has, or how it uses the power it has. I read a quote from Major John Kazora's book, who was saying, I sometimes wonder why parliamentarians behave like puppies before the executive when they have got the mandate, the tools, the powers and privileges of Parliament. Is it because of the caliber or quality of MPs? Why are MPs so unwilling to turn these powerful characters democratic powers into reality. And I think Honourable Augustine today answered part of this when he talked about the circumstances within which
is the environment in which they work.
The environment, the death of institutions. And I think it's upon all of us as a country to make sure that we redeem all this and forestall the instability that Honourable Augustine is so worried about, and I am sure many other people. Thank you very much from us. It is a good weekend. See you next weekend.